Hello, I'm Yanis Varoufakis with a few thoughts on what we should be watching out for as the Palestinian genocide unfolds. Watching on the one hand the Israeli soldiers' video confessions of their genocidal intent and acts, and on the other hand the Palestinians' live streaming of their own deaths and devastation, it is ever so easy to throw one's hands up in the air, to despair, to want to shut the cruelty out, to disengage, to find solace in oblivion. But it is not only ethically wrong to surrender to despair, it is also factually wrong that nothing good can be expected. Things change every day, and yes, in the midst of this misery, of this inhumanity, the seeds of hope are already planted on the blood-soaked soil of the ancient land of Palestine. They may only be seeds, but that's how new life is born. Let us begin with a difficult to discern, yet indubitable reality. Israel is not winning on the battlefields. Gaza has been destroyed, yes. Its population, its entire population, the entire population of Gaza is on death row. And yet the smarter amongst those in the Israeli military know full well that the destruction they wreaked does not translate into a victory. 15 months after they reinvaded the open prison that was Gaza since 1948, they still cannot control more than a small portion of it at a time. Armed resistance, including the regular blowing up of Israeli mighty tanks, is continuing. Israeli military officers also know that their political leaders' stated aim of eradicating Hamas can never be demonstrably achieved, however many Hamas fighters they kill. As a former Israeli general put it to me, even if we kill most of the Gazans before we declare victory, a single teenager raising a single Hamas flag over a pile of rubble will prove that we failed. Similarly in Lebanon, yes, Israel has killed much of the Hezbollah leadership, and yes, the ceasefire it imposed on Hezbollah succeeded in stopping the Hezbollah missile launches in solidarity with the Palestinian resistance further south. However, the Lebanon ceasefire was also forced upon Israel by its army's inability to venture without massive losses by more than a few kilometers into Lebanese territory. And lest we forget, it is simply not true that Hezbollah had to accept the ceasefire because its missile arsenal was destroyed. Israel signed the ceasefire hours after missiles, you remember that? Missiles of Hezbollah hit Haifa and indeed Tel Aviv. In other words, the past year will be remembered as a cruel paradox. Israel destroyed Gaza and much of South Lebanon, mainly from the air. But Israel failed abysmally to control the ground. The time is fast approaching when Israeli society will realize that the thousands of Israeli soldiers that were killed or seriously wounded were the victims of an Israeli leadership that ultimately placed the interests of those soldiers and the people of Israel very low in their own list of priorities. This is also confirmed by the readiness of the Netanyahu government to lie through its teeth about its own casualties on the battlefield. Compare the low number of casualties officially admitted with the more than 20,000 soldiers that Israel's health authorities are telling us they have admitted to veteran rehabilitation centers. Turning now to the medium and long-term impact of the war on Israel's economy, which, after all, is of great significance from the perspective of the apartheid state's capacity to reproduce itself through war and devastation, its financial capacity to reproduce itself. Well, it is instructive to read a letter signed by more than 100 Israeli economists, including Dan Ben David, who explain in full technicolor how Israel's economic miracle is now in peril, how it hinges, it always hinged, on a high-tech sector that numbers at most 300,000 souls, including doctors, scientists, technologists, academics. And Ben David's point being, well, if only 10%, he says, of these 300,000, in other words, if only about 30,000 of those experts and high-tech, well-educated elite, if around 30,000 of them leave the country, Israel's already hugely indebted economy will simply fade out. In Ben David's even starker words, and I quote, "We won't become a third world country. We just won't be anymore. Only 0.6% of the population are doctors, but who trains them? The senior staff in research universities are 0.1% of the people. High-tech workers are 6% of the population. Altogether, this is what I said before, it's 300,000 people. It's enough that a critical mass of this group chooses not to be here tomorrow morning, and the state of Israel leaves the developed world." Close quotation marks. Are they leaving? You bet they are. Leaving behind them, in a more influential position, more dominant than ever, the low productivity bigots who are driving the fascist settler movement in the occupied territories. And the more dominant these low productivity bigots become within government and in society, the greater the exodus of the high-tech, secular, more liberally minded Israelis. This is the definition of a spiral of collapse. This spiral is, of course, utterly connected with the precipitous reputational loss of Israel, the massacres, the genocide of Palestinians, and in particular the manner in which so many Israeli soldiers and politicians celebrated in videos, in speeches, in posts on X. All that has claimed what is left of the illusion of Israel as a European liberal democracy embedded in a hostile Middle East. That illusion has been a central underpinning of the propaganda that helped Israeli lobbyists succeed in Washington and in Brussels. Now it is gone. It is drowned in the sea of flesh and blood the Israeli military has strewn all over Gaza, wherever they went. And of course, the trail of destruction, hatred, and viciousness that the settlers have unleashed across the West Bank and in East Jerusalem. Once Israel's cleverly constructed reputation has gone, sullied, it cannot be reclaimed. And that is good news in the sense that the first step towards a just peace is the ethical fall from grace of the aggressor. Turning now to the situation in the West Bank. It is utterly heart-wrenching to watch the non-stop violence against the Palestinians who live under the brutal apartheid regime in the West Bank, in East Jerusalem. The violence against the Palestinians in the West Bank and in East Jerusalem comes from three quite separate, but of course interlinked and connected quarters. It comes from the Israeli military, from Israeli settlers, and, most tragically, from the Palestinian Authority's own security forces, who are in the midst of the genocide of their people by the apartheid state. They are cooperating fully with the security forces of that same apartheid state. Why the Israeli army is doing it, we know. Why the Israeli settlers are doing it, we know. But why is the leadership of the Palestinian Authority doing it? It's important to note that this is not the first time. The Palestinian Authority, the leadership, has cooperated fully with the Israeli occupiers for a very long time, with occupiers, remember, who are steadfastly rejecting any prospect of the Palestinian Authority becoming the government of the Palestinian state, which contradicts the very raison d'etre of the Palestinian Authority, which ostensibly is to set up a Palestinian state. But now, in the face of the fully fledged genocidal campaign by Israel, the Palestinian Authority's excuses are becoming transparent, thin, impossible to fathom. The unelected, unrepresentative, patently corrupt leadership of the Palestinian Authority is behaving as if to impress Netanyahu and soon Trump, that they, the Palestinian Authority, can do Netanyahu's and Trump's dirty work for them, with a veneer of legitimacy, that they have a role to play. That's what they are trying to convince Netanyahu and Trump. It is a pathetic plea to the genocidal US-Israeli establishment to give them a job to do, especially now that the Palestinian people have seen through them. Nothing else explains why they, the leadership of the Palestinian Authority, are turning even against Fatah members who continue to resist in Jenin and elsewhere. This, I have to confess, is the saddest, most depressing aspect of the Palestinian tragedy. So I shall not dwell on it, except to reiterate the urgent need for the election of a representative and thus legitimate leadership of the Palestinian people. No peace can be imagined, let alone be negotiated otherwise. I hope and trust that the Palestinians will find a way to speak with one representative, non-sectarian voice. Nothing short of that is called for as the Palestinian people face genocide. As for the rest of us, we must stand by to help give this voice, their voice, a chance to be heard. To sum up, to conclude, days before Donald Trump enters the White House, I'm speaking to you on the 9th of January, to give you the precise date, Donald Trump is about to enter the White House. A man who has never not liked any war crime aimed at eradicating the Palestinian resistance. The Palestinians as a people native to Palestine. Just before this man enters the White House, we are at a crossroads, not just as Palestinians, as Europeans, Americans, as humanity. As a humanity that is watching a genocide unfold in real time on our screens. And what is this crossroads? Allow me to paint it with a few brushstrokes. We have mega deaths and uber destruction on the ground wreaked by a US armed and European Union supported Israel. A spiral of collapse within Israel's social economy. Arab countries split between complicit regimes and enraged populations, citizens. A global south that is becoming increasingly powerful and increasingly intolerant of the Western Israeli self-awarded right ethnically to cleanse the non-Jewish native population. And a Western public opinion that can no longer pretend not to know. What is the upshot of this picture, of this crossroads? If I were to issue an educated guess, it would be this. Things will get even worse for the Palestinians in the short run. But in the longer run, the possibility of liberation, of a just peace for Palestinians who refuse to go gently into the good night, and for Israelis who understand the trap into which the Netanyahu regime has ensnared them, seems stronger than it has been for at least 30 years. Thank you, and let's keep up the campaign for a just peace in the Middle East, which is a prerequisite for the liberation of us all. Carpe diem.